So far, we've created a new C# console application named Hello World, and we added 2 lines of our own code. But we haven't really explored what the meaning of this code is. As a beginning student, it was easy to notice the experienced coders just naturally knew where you put periods, commas, parentheses, semicolons, and square brackets. Can you only gain this knowledge with experience? Or are there some exact principles you can follow to know exactly where they go? So what goes into a C# statement or line of code? Well, it's very similar into what goes into a statement in the English language. Let's use the example. Josh, wave your right arm. In this sentence, we have a couple of nouns. Josh is a noun. Right arm is a noun that is a part of the noun Josh. We have a verb that represents actions of the nouns. Wave is a verb, and wave is an action that's supposed to be performed by the right arm. Finally, how do we know we've come to the end of this statement or sentence in the English language? The period represents the end of the sentence. So let's build off of what we know. Let's compare English grammar to C# grammar. Now, in English, you would say, Josh, wave your right arm. In C#, you would say Josh.RightArm.wave, and then Edwin is said in parentheses followed by a semicolon indicating the end of the sentence. C# objects, like nouns, in English, represent things. Josh is a thing, right arm is a thing. Next, C# methods, which is like a verb, it's an action, represents actions for an object. In this case, wave is an action of the right arm, not of Josh, but of the right arm. The semicolon, or like periods in the English language, the semicolon represents the end of the statement, just like the period in English represents the end of the sentence. So here's an important term. Coding languages use statements instead of sentences. Sometimes a statement will be called a line of code. Alright, let's compare C# objects and methods. Let's get more specific. Let's say Josh.RightArm.Pinky.Finger.Nail. See, on his pinky finger is a nail. We want to file and trim the pinky finger on his nail. Okay? How does this break down? Well, Josh is an object, and inside of that object, or belonging to that object, is the right arm. Belonging to the right arm is a pinky finger. Belonging to the pinky finger is another more specific noun called nail. And what do we want to do with it? Well, that's the action. File and trim. So what we have here is the final object that is going to have a method performed on it. So, a series of increasingly specific objects are separated by periods. Josh, right arm, pinky finger, nail, so forth. Every single noun gets more specific as you go to the right of the next period. When the last most specific object is reached, like nail, you can choose an acceptable method for that final object, like trim and file. Methods can be easily identified because they have parentheses. Well, what about adjectives? For example, let's do this. Tina, set your pinky nail color on your right hand to taupe. Nouns, which represent objects or things. Verbs represent actions. Now, adjectives represent settings or properties or descriptions for those objects. Taupe is a description, not an action, of the pinky nail. So, let's do this comparison in C# grammar. In English, Tina, set your pinky nail color on your right hand to taupe. In C#, you go Tina.RightHand.Pinky.Nail.Color equals color.taupe. C# objects, like nouns, Tina, right hand, pinky, and nail. Methods are like verbs. There's no method in this statement. There's no action. We're just setting a color. C# properties are like adjectives. Color, which is set to taupe. Properties are assigned using an equal sign. The semicolon, again, represents the end of your code statement, whether you're using methods or properties. So, let's combine these. Let's say Tina.RightHand.Nail.Color equals color.taupe, or we can say Tina.RightHand.Pinky.Nail, please trim and file it, which is an action. So objects in C# can perform actions and set properties. To get an object to perform some action, call on one of its methods, like file and trim. To set a property of an object, you need to specify the object followed by an assignment operator, in this case, the equal sign. All statements you call in C#.net will end with a semicolon. So let's look at our first line of code inside of our main. We have an object called a console. The console is that black box that comes up on your monitor that can read and write input from the user. What do we want that console to do? We want that console to write something, and we specifically said we want it to write Hello World. Once that is completed, Hello World will be displayed on the console. The next thing we want it to do is we want it to ask the user for input, which is a read line. Now the read line won't finish until the user finally hits enter. Once the user hits enter, it goes to the ending curly brace, which is the end of main, which completes the execution of your program, and the program terminates. Well, that might give you a fair idea about what these two lines of code of your program are doing. But what about all the other items? Well, this area of your code is called the main method. Now, the main method is the starting execution point of your program. So whatever you want your program to do first, you put inside the main method as the first line. All methods, including main, must be inside of a classification called class for short. We have a class called program. Now you can have many classes in your C# application, but program is the class that's created for you by default. Let's see what happens if we try to get rid of the class, but we leave our main here. Let's delete this, and let's try to run it. And it says failed. Would you like to do the last successful build? No. What I want to do is I want to look at the errors. And here it says, expected class, delegate, enum, interface, or struct. You cannot have a method sitting by itself. All methods must be inside of a class. Well, what about this namespace? We'll talk about that in a later chapter, but can you run a C# application without a namespace? Let's try to run this. Wow, that runs just great. So namespaces are not required. They're just highly recommended as they add a great organizational structure to your program. Now, I'm not going to go into that really too far in Chapter 1 because we have a whole chapter dedicated to that. Now, what about all of these namespaces up here? Well, let's look at those. What happens if I delete this one? Do I need that? I'm going to try to run it. Hey, it ran just fine. Those using statements is actually something you don't need, but boy is it going to save you a lot of work. Let me give you an example. Let me delete all of them except for system. Everything's going to run just fine. Okay, but now if I were to delete the using system, what's going to happen? Now I try to run it. And it says errors. Would you like to continue? No, I don't want to continue. I want to see what the errors are. It says the name console does not exist in the current context. In other words, it couldn't find console. Do you know why? Console is a part of the system namespace. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the word system right here. And we're going to put the word system right here. If we do that, then we don't need the system at the top. Let's run this. Everything's fine. Why? What has this code been really doing all along? Well, it's assumed that you have a system, and in that system you have a console. And that console is capable of writing things out. As a matter of fact, almost every class is inside of system. So if you want to type 40 lines of code and put the word system on the front of every one of them, great, you can do that. Or you can just put the word system up here. Now, the word system is implied on the beginning of every line. So these imported namespaces with the using keyword is designed to decrease the amount of typing you have to do on each statement by implying the word in front of each statement. That wraps up Chapter 1.3 on Basic C# Coding. Next item, 1.4, Saving C# Projects.